agencies will please come to order. Good morning. Today we are having a hearing on the Biden administration's fiscal year 2024 budget request for the Department of Education, and I'm very happy to welcome Secretary Cardona to the subcommittee. This hearing is an important opportunity for us to hear about how our non-defense discretionary investments support the learning and development of our nation's students and help build a stronger and fairer economy for all. I'm looking forward to working with Ranking Member Capito in allocating and overseeing these investments in order to make sure they are improving the lives of the constituents we serve. We won't agree on everything, but I'm committed to working together to find common ground and make progress for Wisconsinites, West Virginians, and communities all across the United States. Unfortunately, a measure that was passed by House Republicans 2 weeks ago would actually slash and cap funding for vital programs that educate our youth in exchange for raising the debt limit. This bill passed 2 weeks ago utterly fails. The House Republican bill would force deep cuts to education and training programs, on average of at least 22%, or $17.5 billion from the Department of Education. This would be absolutely devastating for students, educators, and families. Now, this is Teacher Appreciation Week, and what we saw from the House Republicans 2 weeks ago, they proposed funding that would, or cuts in funding that would otherwise support key education formula grants like IDEA. And that would mean funding also for an estimated 100,000 fewer teachers and educators. That is no way to show appreciation for their important work. That spending plan would cut funding for TRIO and Pell Grants, and ultimately programs that help students graduate with less debt. It would mean cuts to impact aid for schools serving students from military families and other federally connected school districts, and programs that support HBCUs and other minority-serving institutions, and the list goes on. But I'm happy to see that the budget before us today rejects that approach. President Biden's proposal for the Department of Education wisely invests in our future by increasing support for students from preschool to post-secondary education. I look forward to the hard work of finding compromise with my colleagues to mark up a fiscal year 2024 labor HHS bill that does the same. Mr. Secretary, as you know, addressing our nation's education and workforce needs is critical to maintaining our competitiveness globally. We have near record low unemployment, but also near record job openings, including 174,000 unfilled openings in Wisconsin, which I hear echoed in my conversations with employers in my state. I am happy to see a $226 million increase in this budget for career and technical education, which helps students obtain the skills needed for in-demand careers. Perkins funding is helping Wisconsin to expand regional career pathways and improve work-based learning programs. Mr. Secretary, I look forward to working with you to ensure investments in CTE support and address the needs of states and local communities. I'm also pleased to see that the budget proposes increased investments in key federal elementary and secondary education programs. This includes an increase of $2.2 billion for the Title I-A grant program and $2.1 billion in increases for the IDEA state grants. These programs help ensure all students, including students from low-income families and students with disabilities, have access to high-quality educational opportunities. These proposed increases would build on increases provided in the bipartisan appropriations bills we passed in fiscal years 2022 and 2023. As we mark National Adolescent Health Month, we have to acknowledge the significant mental health challenges facing many of our youth. In my home state of Wisconsin, the latest survey data released late last year revealed that more than 1/3 of high school students experienced symptoms of depression, the highest rate since the survey was first administered nearly 30 years ago. An alarming 18% of students surveyed seriously considered attempting suicide in the past 12 months, the highest rate in nearly 20 years. And nearly half of all LGBTQ students surveyed reported they seriously considered or attempted suicide. We must do more to support all of our students, which I'm happy to see this budget does with increased investments in key formula and competitive grants that could increase access to mental health services in schools. Finally, if we really want to help all of our students, we also need to start accepting them for who they are and welcoming and supporting them in our schools. I'm greatly concerned by the increasing divide and rhetoric in our schools and communities, from laws targeting transgender students to taking books off school shelves. Mr. Secretary, I hope you can help by effectively supporting states and school districts in providing all students with the high-quality education and support they need to reach their full potential. In a moment, I'll turn it over to Ranking Member Capito for her opening remarks. Following Senator Capito's opening statement, we will hear from you, Secretary Cardona, and after that, senators will each have 5 minutes for a round of questions. And we do expect that people will be in and out this morning. There are multiple competing hearings and markups. So, Senator Capito.
Good morning, and thank you, Senator Chair Baldwin. Thank you, Secretary Cardona, for the phone call earlier in the week, but also for appearing before the subcommittee today to discuss your funding priorities for the Department of Education for the fiscal year 2024. As we know, education is the key to success and a vital part of maintaining strong communities, which is why I've long been committed to making sure that all Americans have the opportunity to receive high-quality education, preschool through college. In fact, my professional career began as a college counselor and advisor in West Virginia, where I had the opportunity to work closely with first-generation college students and see firsthand how education provided them with life-changing opportunities. So I'm excited to take on the new role as the ranking member, along with my friend Chair Baldwin, in charge of funding and the oversight of the Department of Education. It's not lost on me that the last 3 years have been exceptionally challenging for our nation's education system. Pandemic-related school closures have disrupted the lives of students and families across America and set our country back 2 decades, both in reading and math achievement, according to the most recent National Assessment of Educational Progress scores. Just last week, the NAEP reported that knowledge of civics among the nation's 8th graders fell for the first time since the federal government began testing children under the current framework in 1998, along with a 5-point decline in average test scores in history. It's troubling. And these devastating declines in achievement were in spite of the $190 billion in COVID relief funding provided for elementary and secondary education. We can and should do better. Unfortunately, this budget is almost a carbon copy of the FY 2023 budget, which was recently rejected, recycling partisan proposals and unrealistic spending levels. The 2024 budget request for the Department of Education is $90 billion, an increase of more than 13% over FY 2023. Expensive new federal programs like free community college and universal preschool, both of which my home state of West Virginia are already doing without unwanted federal intervention, are ill-advised and unlikely to be considered. Meanwhile, common sense bipartisan programs like the Rural Education Program were level funded in this budget. The state of the federal student loan program is also a problem, and I am very concerned. Your budget request increases $620 million for the administration of student aid, and the majority of that increase would go towards servicing student loans. Yet the administration has consistently refused to restart collection of student loan payments, delaying return to repayment 6 times since President Biden took office. Furthermore, the administration has undertaken an effort to provide widespread student loan forgiveness with no legal basis for that forgiveness. While I share the administration's desire to modernize and improve student loan servicing, as well as successfully move to a new long-term servicing solution, I have no faith in any increase provided for the student aid administration account would be used solely for that purpose. Our nation is facing fiscal challenges that will not make our jobs easy this year. In order to be successful, we must work together to prioritize funding that best supports opportunity for all students. This means supporting core formula grant programs like Title I, as were mentioned by the chair, and IDEA that provide the most flexibility to local communities to best meet the demands or the needs of their students, put education decisions as close to the local schools, teachers, and families as possible. And I am encouraged that the budget prioritizes these crucial programs. This also means ensuring students have access to multiple pathways to a successful career. While traditional higher ed is a goal of many students, many others are interested in alternative pathways, including career and technical education, apprenticeships, and increasingly short-term certificate and licensing programs. We should continue to invest in programs like career and technical state grants and explore how our higher ed programs can better support students seeking meaningful work-based learning opportunities, including expanding the Pell to short-term programs. In West Virginia, we've seen numerous examples of how we can succeed and the opportunities it can produce. Marshall University and Mount West Community and Technical College, who just had an excellent graduation speaker, that would be me, have joined force to develop workforce training programs to support the state's growing aerospace economy. Educational programming for aerospace will include both workforce training for maintenance technicians and a new flight school to help address pilot shortages and introduce that career path to our region. Here they saw a need and an opportunity for good careers for their students, and they're making it a reality. Toyota Motor Manufacturing and Bridge Valley Community College have a similar partnership where Toyota provides industry expertise on curriculum and donates equipment to ensure students are learning on the latest cutting-edge technology. Students in the Advanced Manufacturing Technology program attend school 2 days a week and work at the plant 3 days a week. Some students have earned more than $40,000 to the program. I would add that Toyota has also incorporating a program with the high school students as well and just expanded that into Putnam County. Mr. Secretary, while there are numerous areas where we would disagree, we also have many shared priorities in the budget request. As we go through the FY 2024 appropriations, I look forward to working with you to prioritize programs that help provide the opportunity for high-quality education for all students. And thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Senator Capito. And our witness today is Dr. Miguel Cardona, the Secretary of the Department of Education. Secretary Cardona, thank you so much for joining us. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. You may begin.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chairwoman Baldwin and Ranking Member Capito and distinguished members of the committee. And congratulations to both of you on your roles. I'm really pleased and happy to be able to be here today to testify on behalf of President Biden's fiscal year 2024 budget request for the Department of Education. This month and next, students across the country are graduating from college or from high school and starting the next phase of their lives. It's a big moment, a moment that's part of a broader educational journey from cradle to career and beyond. At every step of the way, the choices we make here in Washington might mean the difference between the status quo or a brighter future for them if we act together. That's why I think of this budget proposal through the lens of a child's journey through education. In this scenario, a child starting her educational journey builds a strong foundation for learning right away, because the budget that we're presenting today makes it possible to expand high-quality preschool for more 4-year-olds across America. Now imagine when the student gets to elementary school. If she's a student with disabilities, she benefits from the additional $2.7 billion in this budget to help include her and support her. She also learns the fundamentals of reading, math, and other rigorous subjects she'll need to succeed in life. Her instruction would be strengthened because of the Title I critical funding that helps enable schools tailor instruction and use data to provide one-on-one support. Thanks to the additional $2.2 billion this budget delivers for Title I schools, her school and the schools in rural, urban, and suburban communities across our country are better prepared to succeed. Wherever she goes to school, she can always count on having a well-prepared and talented teacher to help her learn and grow. Because this budget invests $3 billion to fully prepare, develop, and retain a strong and diverse educator workforce. And as you mentioned, it is Teacher Appreciation Week. And in my estimation as an lifelong educator, this budget reflects an appreciation for the dedicated educators we have in this country. The student and her family would get wraparound supports because we have more than doubled the funding for full-service community schools. And if she faced some challenges with her mental health, as we know many students do, she can go directly to a mental health professional right at her school because the school benefited from our budget investment of another $500 million to advance the goal of doubling the number of school counselors, school social workers, and mental health providers that are available to our kids at this time when we're living in a youth mental health crisis. As a student gets older and comes closer to adulthood, she has pathways to careers and skills to succeed in the world, much like you mentioned, Senator Capito. We set her up to compete and succeed in a stronger economy than ever with well-paying jobs at the ready because this budget delivers a $200 million investment in redesigning our high schools to better prepare our young people for careers of today and tomorrow, and $43 million in additional funding for career and technical education, something that our country needs to do more of. We set her up to compete in a global economy with proficiency in multiple languages because we delivered $1.2 billion for Title III and new investments to expand multilingual teaching and instruction and world language investments that are good for all students. She also has a jump start on her path toward earning a college degree or credential because we work together to make post-secondary education inclusive and affordable. We increased the Pell Grant. We invested in proven strategies that help students like her better afford college and succeed in earning her degree. We supported our HBCUs, our TCUs, and MSIs, and we made universal community college a reality worldwide, nationwide. This vision of our future isn't reality yet. But these are just a few of the incredible ways together we can raise the bar for education when Congress acts to advance these education priorities in President Biden's FY24 budget. If we can work together, I know we can and we will raise the bar for education in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Cardona. I have several questions that I want to get to, but first, as I noted in my opening statement, the House Republicans passed a measure 2 weeks ago that would have devastating impacts on our educational system, from preschool all the way through college. Right. Very briefly, is there anything you would like to add about what a $17.5 billion cut might mean for education programs in the schools and educators and students and families that they support that I didn't mention or that you want to reemphasize?
Well, I think it's important to remember, as we recover from the pandemic academically, and, I think in a very bipartisan fashion, agree that there's a level of urgency that's needed to make sure our students not only recover but achieve higher levels. The programs that would be impacted the most are Title I, which is support for our schools where students are struggling in reading, and IDEA, which are for students who need extra support because they're students with disabilities. Two groups that have been most impacted by the pandemic. We're talking thousands of teachers being cut. The education budgets are human resources, right? When I was a district leader, 80-90% of our budget was on educators. So this drastic cut would limit the number of teachers we have available to support students at a time when our kids need it most and when we're facing a shortage already.
Secretary Cardona, you and I visited Northeast Wisconsin Technical College together a few years ago. And I appreciate your focus on career and technical education in this budget. Studies have shown that students who take CTE courses in high school are more likely to graduate high school and pursue a post-secondary education, among other benefits of those studies. At the same time, I want to ensure Perkins funding supports state and local communities and the innovation that is happening there.
Right.
So can you expand on your request for the Career-Connected High School program and how you see that leveraging resources provided through the core Perkins Title I state grants program?
Sure. I do remember that visit. It was a great visit. One thing that I find as a common theme when I visit, whether it's high schools that have career exploration programs or universities, the level of student engagement is through the roof. Students want to be there. They're excited. That visit, I remember visiting Florida maybe a week ago or 2 weeks ago in Miami. There was a program where there were like 25 different options for students. And earlier, I don't know if it was this week or maybe Thursday or Friday of last week, there was a school in Hampton, Virginia that I visited where students had pathways to careers. So we feel strongly that the additional dollars, $200 million for competitive grants for LEAs, is also intended to what I call evolve our high schools. Our high schools are designed in many ways like they were 2 pandemics ago. We have to do better. I call it evolving them to make sure that they're connected to our 2-year schools, to our pathways into career. I went to a technical high school and I studied automotive technology for 4 years. The engagement was really high, and I think we have to really address the stigma in this country that creating pathways is telling students where they're going to end up. It's providing options. I had options when I graduated. I went to a 4-year school. So what we're trying to do is really take what we know is working in our 2-year schools because they're more malleable to the industry needs and the regional workforce needs, and saying, why don't we start earlier and start giving our high school students an opportunity to get college credits so they feel like they belong in college, but also do it in a way that aligns it to some of the regional workforce needs that they might experience in the future. And I have to say, Senator, I'm excited about the potential in this country for the jobs that are going to be coming, the careers that are going to be coming with some of the Invest in America strategies. And it's really important that it's not only good for students, but it's important for our country that we evolve our high schools. So the funding that we're asking for is to really accelerate that and make sure we're lifting up good models in high schools as well.
With the ranking member's indulgence, I have a follow-on on the same topic. It'll be easier. Thank you. States have shown what they can do when they have flexibility with additional resources for career and technical education, including with American Rescue Plan funding. It allows states to expand work-based learning opportunities, including registered apprenticeships. It allows states to expand regional career pathway programs, which is what Wisconsin is doing with its Perkins funding. What are some of the innovative ways that you have seen states and school districts and communities and technical colleges using their Perkins funding?
Sure. So what I'm seeing happening in our country, and it's a step in the right direction, is we're moving from pockets of excellence that are dependent on people that really get it, or people that maybe had experience in the industry, and now it's becoming systematized. So what they're doing is they're creating industry workforce boards that work with higher education institutions and K-12 institutions to come together to say, what does good programming look like? What are the critical skills that we need our students to learn? And there's an engagement at an earlier level behind the scenes, before the students get to the schools. So I'm seeing an investment there. I'm seeing curricular development that is focused on the skills that are needed to have success in the workforce. I visited Columbus State Community College in Ohio, and I was able to have a roundtable, and there was I think it was the vice president for Intel, the community college president, the superintendent of the K-12 system, and they were talking to me about how they meet regularly, how folks from Intel are working with the college and the K-12 system. So for me, systematizing the work is the direction that we're going, and I'm proud that the dollars would be used for that.
Thank you. Senator Capito.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Let's talk about the student loan pause that we are currently under. It's been more than 3 years since student loan borrowers have been required to repay their loans. At the height of the pandemic, it made sense to give borrowers limited relief from repaying student loans, and Congress provided that relief through the CARES Act. However, 8 extensions of the payment pause later, and with the official end of the public health emergency today, it is time to transition borrowers back to repayment. Will you commit to restarting repayment no later than September the 1st, as you've previously announced that you would, regardless of how the Supreme Court may rule on the loan forgiveness?
Thank you, Senator. And yes, we're glad today is the day where it ends, and we recognize that during the pandemic, it was very difficult for borrowers.
Right.
And we are committed to making sure that once a decision is made, that we're going to resume payments 60 days after, but no later than June 30th, we're going to begin that process.
Okay. Are you communicating now, or your servicers communicating with borrowers about the upcoming return? I mean, this shouldn't be surprising people because obviously they're going to have to plan. And I don't know what kind. We've heard that servicers are being encouraged to not talk with borrowers. So what is the status of that?
Sure. So we recognize that our borrowers need information, and they need a long on-ramp because it has been 3 years of resuming payments. We're confident, Senator, that the Supreme Court will rule in favor of the targeted debt relief, providing relief for millions of borrowers, and we want to make sure that the information that borrowers get is accurate. We do plan on making sure it's a smooth re-entry to repayment, and we're prepared at FSA to provide the supports that our students.
So are you communicating with them now, those facts?
We have communicated with them, and we do have our website. We have sent emails in the past about when the loan pause repayment will start.
So they're aware of the dates and everything?
They are, yes.
Okay. Let's talk about the increase in your budget of 31% to the student aid administration. I mentioned it in my opening statement. An increase of $620 million. I mentioned in there, the return to. I mentioned in my statement that the concerns that I have that how this money will be used. Will it be used? I think it was used in the past for some loan forgiveness. But that, I don't think, is the intent of the Student Aid Administration funding formula. So what kind of assurances can you give me that you'll stick with the core operations if, in fact, you get a bump in this budget?
Thank you, Senator. FSA, since day one, has really been focused on making sure we're fixing a broken system, a system that...
well, let's go back here. The system's been in place for years now, right?
The higher education access wasn't available for all students. So what I'm suggesting is that the FSA has been working on fixing a system which includes public service loan forgiveness. It includes making sure we're providing federal loan servicing. So the budget that we're requesting is critical for those services to be administered.
When you're forgiving a loan, are you using the money out of this account to forgive that loan? I mean, is that how the account that goes?
No, the funding is being used to implement programs like we're simplifying the FAFSA program, and we're rolling out FAFSA in a way that's going to get more students. Excuse me?
When is that going to be?
Yeah, that's going to be this year, and I have to say, Senator, we're expecting upwards of 600,000 more students being able to access higher education. I'm really proud of the work that's happening there. FSA has been working really hard on that.
I hope former Senator Lamar Alexander is listening to this, because he talked about it, as you know, all the time. He's going to be happy to know it's finally going to get rolled out. But go ahead.
Thank you. When I say we're fixing a broken system, we really want to make sure that higher education is accessible to more students. I was a first-generation college student, and I navigated that process, and it's not the simplest process. I want to make sure students today have the ability to attend college, and that's in large part to the work that FSA is going to be doing. The funding for FSA is critical, and I worry that if not funded adequately, we're not going to be able to provide the services to our students, which could limit the number of students that access college and limit the benefits to those who are eligible and deserve benefits, like our veterans.
Okay. Thank you.
Before I recognize Senator Reid, I'm going to have to run to another committee, and I will return. Ranking Member Capito will continue in my absence. Senator Reid.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Ms. Secretary, thank you. Good to see you. We have approximately in the United States about an $85 billion annual shortfall in school facilities investment. That's an estimate of the State of Our Schools report in 2021. And Congressman Bobby Scott and I have been working and are prepared to reintroduce legislation that would provide $130 billion in federal investment in needs. And one of the things that strikes me is that nowadays to have, first of all, young people sort of respect education, and they don't want to be in literally a dump. They want to be in something that's up-to-date, modern. And also there's a big push for technical expertise requiring laboratories and a whole range of different subjects, and they're not in the 1925 high schools, which you know about and I know about. So what steps are you taking to assist the steps and the states, rather, in addressing these needs? Anything?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. I agree with you. It became most evident the importance that we should be placing on our facilities during the pandemic. I remember visiting some communities that were not able to reopen schools because of the deferred maintenance on their heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, meaning there was no airflow. And it took the pandemic for them to realize that we should have kept up. I've walked into buildings where, there's no corporate spaces that would ever function that way, but we can put our students in their classrooms of 90 degrees or higher in the summer months. So there is a lot of work to do there to modernize some buildings and make sure that it's conducive to learning. This is about learning, right? We know there's an impact on learning when we think about the environment. We're working on 2 grant competitions to address healthier and more equitable schools. We agree with you that we have to pay close attention to it. I think before the pandemic, it was an issue that really never got the attention it needed. Now, folks are looking at it. Thanks to the American Rescue Plan, there are dollars that are going to that. But I think we need to continue to make sure our schools are conducive to learning.
Thank you very much. Many people suggest that we are in a literacy crisis, not just for young students, but also for adults. And this impacts our productivity. It impacts everything we do. As Chairman of the Armed Services Committee, we are seeing more and more young people disqualified from service because they don't have the skills to pass the basic test. And also, there's just a tax on our libraries. And Congressman Grijalva and I have introduced legislation, the Right to Read Act, which would help provide resources and training and freedom for school libraries. I wonder if you could comment on that.
Sure, thank you for that. I agree that despite the importance of ensuring our buildings are reopened and safe and conducive to learning, the importance of providing mental health support to our students, we cannot take our eyes off the fact that the United States is 9th in reading amongst other countries, 31st in the world in math. We have to make sure we're focusing on academics, getting our students to read, perform high levels of math, increase STEM, especially because of the STEM jobs coming. Clearly, the civics data that just came out is appalling. We must do better, and we have a plan for that. We have a plan for that. Our Raise the Bar strategy is focusing on literacy and numeracy and making sure students are getting access to quality curriculum. You know, we have a bunch of folks at the Department of Education that have spent their careers as school superintendents, state chiefs, school principals. We've done this work, and we're eager to make sure that we're pushing for higher achievement in reading and math, and happy to share our plan. It is on our website. We want everyone to take a look at it.
Now, all of these necessary initiatives, rebuilding schools, enhancing literacy and numeracy, also encouraging more individuals to go into teaching, and then have a
Right.
plan for professional development throughout their careers. How would this all be affected if we imposed a roughly 20% cut on the Department of Education?
Well, I mentioned earlier that I have serious concerns as a father. If even the schools in my community were to receive cuts equivalent to 22% of the federal share, we're talking teachers for students that struggle with reading. We're talking cuts to teachers for students with disabilities, those who I would argue were most impacted by the pandemic. We're talking about cuts in mental health supports for schools, which, as you know, we're in a youth mental health crisis. So what I'd like to share is, while I'm very concerned with those cuts, what I'm hearing from parents, what I'm hearing from students and educators is that the dollars that were provided in the American Rescue Plan were able to help with some of that recovery. Cutting not only, you know, we know that the American Rescue Plan dollars come to an end next year. Cutting funding, ongoing funding for education is taking us backwards, and I think would have a devastating effect on students.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Chair Murray, welcome.
Well, thank you very much, and I want to thank Chair Baldwin and Ranking Member Capito, because really, as we continue to push towards regular order for the first time in years, these hearings are really crucial to keeping us on track, and a smooth appropriations process is critical if we want to make sure that our nation remains competitive on the world stage. Right. We have a responsibility here to work in a timely, bipartisan way to pass these funding bills and make the investments that our nation needs to avoid falling behind. And that is especially important when it comes to education. As a former preschool teacher, I can tell you we have to get this right for our kids, for our families, because actually when it comes to competing to other countries, winning the future isn't just about how much we spend on the military, it's also about how we invest in our kids. Are we making sure our kids get a strong start in life so they can grow up and thrive? High-quality public schools, enriching after-school, summer programs, the opportunity to pursue higher education goals. Are we giving teachers and educators the support they need to take on one of our nation's most important jobs? Are we giving parents the support they need to both be involved in their kids' education and do their jobs and support their families? Are we supporting our students and closing achievement gaps? We can't afford to shortchange these issues, especially if we want to stay ahead of our competitors, like the Chinese government. If we want to keep on the cutting edge of discovery, we have to support the next generation of researchers. We have to light that spark of curiosity, and we have to invest in higher education institutions that help it burn bright. If we want a strong workforce, we have to make sure everyone can pursue a high-quality education and career training opportunities. So the bottom line is, if we want our country to grow and thrive like it has for past generations, we have to invest in the next generation. And that's why this committee and this appropriations is so critical. So I am committed to making sure we move forward in a strong way. So Secretary Cardona, good to see you again here. You know, thanks to the American Rescue Plan and the earlier bipartisan COVID relief plans, we actually provided states and school districts significant funding to support students' academic and overall well-being. The American Rescue Plan specifically required states and districts to set aside funding to address learning loss. And across the country, they have implemented supports I've heard about, like high-intensity tutoring, summer learning programs, things like that. And I really want to build on those investments and make sure we use evidence-based programs, address barriers to implementation, and get states the technical assistance they need. So can you talk with us today about how the department is going to continue to prioritize how disproportionately harmed students will be helped through this budget and elsewise?
Sure. Thank you very much, Chair Marie. Agree wholeheartedly that we have an obligation to make sure we're lifting up those practices that are really targeting those students who are impacted the most. The set aside for learning loss, I believe it was 20%. We've seen upwards of 60% because we know that right now, academic recovery and making sure our students are reading on grade level is a key priority. We can't talk about pathways, we can't talk about higher education access if our children are not reading, and we're really focusing on that. I've seen in my visits and also in working with my team at the department, we probably had more students in summer school this past year, engaging summer school programs paid for by these dollars than ever in our history. Targeted tutoring programs with, as you mentioned, evidence-based, right? It's not enough to say we're going to bring a student, have a volunteer come in and just help the student with their homework. I'm talking about high-dosage tutoring on curricular connected topics where their child is struggling that is informed by the student performance in the classroom. We've seen an increase of those programs, and we're supporting it through technical assistance, through lifting up which districts are doing it well, creating a repository of ideas and best practices. We've had 5 summits on academic recovery through the pandemic at the Department of Education, where we lifted up practices across the country on what's working for students. We're proud to elevate the work of educators across the country and how they're using the American Rescue Plan dollars.
I appreciate that. And I want to ask you about homelessness because there's a 15% increase from the previous year of young students who are homeless. And I'm just really concerned about that, learning loss, how we deal with that. Talk to us a little bit about how you deal with the homelessness issue with our kids.
Definitely. Housing insecurity and homelessness has increased during the pandemic. Many students had to move from one state to another because of issues with COVID or loss in the family. And it was really difficult for many of our students. Thanks to the American Rescue Plan dollars, $800 million toward homelessness, we've seen those dollars being used to provide wraparound supports. We've seen liaisons out in the community working with community partners to make sure that the students have, if it's food insecurity, that's addressed. If they need a place to stay, that's addressed. Tutoring and transportation. So those dollars have been used to provide some of those basic needs that our children need in order to be ready to learn when they get into the building. Definitely have seen those dollars being used well to make sure that our neediest students are getting the supports that they need.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time this morning.
Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, Chairwoman Baldwin and Ranking Member Capito, for convening today, and I certainly appreciate the Secretary being here and taking time to speak with us. Mr. Secretary, with workforce shortages felt in just about every sector, workforce development is obviously more important than ever. I just had a lot of the maritime industries in my office this morning with shipbuilding, with, well, it's barge companies and towing companies, that it's just very critical right now, and they came to D.C. to ask me for help with this. But it just emphasizes the need to strengthen and increase the number of career and technical education programs across our country, especially in rural areas where I come from that lack certain trained professionals. In what ways can the department and Congress assist in promoting and broadening the reach of career and technical education programs in both K through 12 schools and community colleges?
Thank you for that, and I share the interest that you expressed around making sure we're leveling up our career and technical education programs, making sure that our schools are attuned to the careers that are available to our students, and making sure that, in this case, maritime industry partners are connected with our universities, but also our K-12 systems to give our students exposure earlier to the careers that exist for them. that's even more important in rural communities, where oftentimes I've spoken to folks from the rural community, kind of felt like they're not being listened to as much, and we're taking that very seriously. Through our rural education program, we're asking for $215 million. Title I, there's a share for for rural communities. At the department, we're proud we brought on Julia Cunningham, who's now the new director of rural engagement, and we want to make sure that we're targeting our support, technical assistance, and guidance to rural communities, in addition to what we're doing generally, but we're creating a rural community of practice on career pathways. And I would welcome an opportunity, I would really welcome an opportunity for my team to engage with some of the folks that visited you this morning to see how what we can hear from them, how we can make sure our services are providing the support that they're looking for and that our schools need in our rural communities.
So what are these programs doing? Give me some examples.
Sure. So what they're doing, and I visited a rural community in Kentucky recently where I saw the students in the CTE program there engaging in jobs that could be done from Kentucky where they don't have to leave Kentucky. So it could be, for example, a cybersecurity pathway where the students are able to work remotely but work on issues of cybersecurity or get careers in cybersecurity. We saw them working in different programs that connect them to jobs in the region as well. And I think we also have to make sure we're taking into account the specific challenges in rural communities. Oftentimes broadband is an issue. Oftentimes there are no large plants next to them. So we have to think creatively about what we're going to do in rural communities to make sure that those students have the same access.
And how do we incentivize the industry groups to increase their investment in workforce training initiatives to train students for these high-skilled, in-demand technical jobs? Because a lot of these jobs are really good jobs, 6-digit.
Exactly.
So how do we get industry to address this?
We created recently a rural strategy and action team whose job it is to do just that. And I'd be happy to have more engagement with that team that we just created, with you and your team, to share specifics. But as I said earlier, we're trying to focus on rural needs and making sure that those students have the same opportunities as other students in the country.
Well, thank you for that. And I've got one more. The charter school program has not received an increase in funding since fiscal year 2019. Despite the increase in demand and growing student waiting lists across the country, in addition, charter schools lack sufficient resources for their facilities. What will your department do to support charter schools that have had level funding for 5 years but would like to welcome more students because they do have a waiting list and access the needed resources so they can keep their doors open?
Thank you, Senator. We do believe that charter schools do provide an option for families. Public charter schools are an option for families. We have not reduced funding. We've kept the same level of funding, and we recognize that charter schools do provide support. We're available for technical support and guidance as well, and we'll continue to do that.
So you'll continue to keep it level with no increases?
We'll continue to support charter schools, and the budget this year, it does not ask for an increase. We're focusing our increases on areas where we're noticing students are underperforming woefully to help level up in those situations.
Yeah, because with inflation, I mean, if you hadn't had an increase in 5 years, there's definitely cuts having to be made. Thank you so much.
Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Secretary Cardona, thank you for being here this morning and for your good work.
Okay.
I enjoyed the exchange with Senator Murray about the funds that Congress allocated through the CARES Act and the American Rescue Plan that have gone to schools. Mm-hmm. And I know that while we designated specifically some of the uses, some schools have been using those funds for needed renovations, to make facility upgrades, to improve schools' ventilation, that sort of thing. And I'm beginning to hear some concern from districts in New Hampshire who, because of the challenges they've encountered from contractor capacity issues, from supply chain problems, they're concerned about whether they're going to be able to complete their projects by the deadline for obligation of the American Rescue Plan funds. So can you talk about what the department is doing to provide clarity to school districts and to ensure that we've got enough flexibility so that we can complete projects that have
Right.
been started.
Yeah, we recognize, and we've been engaging with districts, district leaders, state leaders around this issue of making sure that they're able to get the projects that they need done. We recognize, for a period of time, there was a challenge getting materials, or some of the supply chain issues were delaying some of the materials from getting into districts. And I appreciate the conversations that I'm having with superintendents and chiefs around, well, we want to make sure we're able to use ARP dollars to do this. We're continuing to work with them and monitor them. We want to make sure that the projects are completed, and we remain in communication with them to make sure that they can continue using those dollars to those projects that they know are best for students.
Has guidance been issued to states and school districts about what's allowable? And if they're going to states, are we sure that that information is getting passed down to the
Yeah.
districts?
Well, yeah, the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education is in communication regularly with state chiefs, superintendents, but what we can do is make sure that information continues to go to the representative groups. So, for example, AASA represents the superintendents, the school chiefs officers group. We get information to them. We'll make sure that the information continues to go out, and we'll be
Do
happy
we
to
not have
take
a list
questions.
at the Department of Education of all of the school districts in the country?
We do, and we will continue to communicate with that, but as you know, there's a lot of transiency in superintendency, so we want to make sure that through the state superintendent's group, they're the ones that really are having the regular meetings and communicating with them, although we'll use various formats of communication.
Well, again, I think whatever clarity can be provided
Sure.
is really important because, as I said, we're hearing from districts in New Hampshire who are not clear about what they need to do in order to ensure that they can complete their projects.
Thank you, Senator. And if it's okay, I'd like to have my team reach out to you to reach
That'd
out to
be
those specific districts. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course.
On Monday, I was at a school, in a high school in New Hampshire, and I was there to talk to them about the mental health, substance use, suicide prevention
Right.
program that they have in place. And it's a very impressive program, but one of the issues that came up was fentanyl. And we had a hearing yesterday with the administrator of the Drug Enforcement Agency. They have a whole campaign trying to make sure people understand how deadly this fentanyl challenge is and how potentially harmful it is for anybody who may get access to fentanyl. And I raised this concern with the school, and I was told that they hadn't really engaged on that issue. When I asked the administrator whether she was working with the Department of Education to do any kind of campaign around awareness for schools and students, it sounded to me like that is not happening. And I appreciate, having been a teacher, I understand that we ask a lot of our educators, and I appreciate all that they do. But I also believe that this is a crisis.
Right.
When we've lost over 70,000 people from fentanyl in 1 year, it's a threat to our students that's every bit as bad as any suicide or any other threat that they're facing. So can you talk to me about what you all are doing? We also provided $2 billion for mental health in the Safer Communities Act to the department. To talk about addressing mental health, can you talk about how you're utilizing that and how you incorporate substance misuse as part of that?
Sure. So I agree with you that, these issues that come up in our communities also come up in our schools. And we have to make sure that our schools, just like we talk about CTE being connected with the changing workforce needs, we too have to be responding to what our students are facing or what they're seeing in the community.
Right.
Through the BISCA, as you mentioned, there are dollars intended to make sure that school safety plans are up to par, and part of that includes professional development. I think there's $500 million in BISCA for professional development and activities intended to make sure that our schools have the professional learning opportunities for teachers, for administrators, and that includes addressing whether it's mental health needs, substance abuse needs, or other issues that our students are facing. We do recognize that it is a significant issue, and we stand ready to support districts and states. If they're looking for support on this or some direction, happy to reach out.
Well, I would encourage you to also reach out to the DEA about what they're doing, because I think there are some opportunities there to coordinate in ways that would be impactful. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Bozeman.
Why don't you jump over to Brian and let him?
All right, Senator Schatz.
He looks like he's got someplace to be.
No, only if you insist.
No, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Never seen anything like this. Good morning, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for being here. I want to start with Native Hawaiian education. Do I have your commitment to continue to support robust funding for the Native Hawaiian education program?
Yes.
I've heard from providers in the state of Hawaii that there are officials at the department that suggest that the federal trust responsibility that the federal government has to Native Hawaiian communities does not extend to their work. Do you believe that the entirety of your department has an obligation to carry out this trust responsibility?
Absolutely, Senator.
Do I have your commitment to make sure that all of the good people in your department administering programs, pushing out grants, overseeing this program and others, get the message with precision and clarity from you?
It'll be very clear, and our actions have shown that we must support all Native students, and it's not limited to one office. It's our entire Department of Education. Thank you.
Yeah, I think your actions have shown that, but I'm just telling you that at the line level, and I understand this because as the chairman of Indian Affairs, a lot of times what we do is extend obligations into other departments and into other programs where people have been running the program in a certain way for a long time. So I do think it's really important that you have your people drill down and just make sure that all the good people doing all the good work understand that they have a obligation under federal law to do it this way.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. My office has heard concerns from current prison education providers about difficulties working with the department on the implementation of Pell eligibility. Can you just tell me how the department is working with existing education providers on Pell restoration to make sure that we ensure a smooth transition?
Well, look, we're looking forward to continuing the support with regard to Pell for incarcerated students and expanding that, providing opportunities. We look at this as an opportunity to help those who are really trying to get back on their feet and gain skills to be successful. We look at that as an opportunity for us. We've expanded programming. As you know, we had the pilot program, we expanded it, and we're looking forward to continuing it. And we welcome opportunities to engage with folks to make sure that the program works. It's fairly new for many, so there may be a lot of questions, but we want to make sure that we're supporting it, and our team is available and ready to have conversations or meet with folks if there's work that needs to be done to make it smoother.
Thank you. You know, over the last couple of days and weeks, some have suggested that armed guards in schools might be a solution to school shootings. I want to set aside the practical question of whether or not an armed guard or two at a school would actually prevent anything, and I think there's some, at least anecdotal evidence that it wouldn't. But I want to talk, because it's the Appropriations Committee, about cost. Recent estimates put the cost of placing 2 armed guards in each school between $21 and $36 billion per year. Assuming flat funding, in other words, assuming you had to absorb that new cost, because I don't think there's going to be a $36 billion annual additional appropriation for this purpose. Tell me about what kinds of cuts you would have to sustain within the department.
Sure. Well, first of all, Senator, let me just share how, as a former school principal, the safety of our students was my #1 priority, and that there were multiple strategies to ensure the safest learning environment possible. With regard to the question about the $36 billion, that translates into teachers. There's no other way to answer that than to say that it would take from what we're currently trying to do, which is help our students learn how to read, achieve in math, and have college and career pathways. If you're taking from the same pot, it's going to result in education staff being reduced.
Thank you. Final question. I know these are local decisions, but you're the secretary of the department federally. Just tell me your thoughts on book bans.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a local decision, but as a father and as an educator, I'm just, it's alarming the degree to which we have state leaders taking books out of the hands of kids and decimating libraries and politicizing what should be something that unifies us, making sure that our students are literate, providing them diverse text so they can learn about different cultures, and even explicit bans on history that teaches the experience of Black Americans. That, to me, is extremely alarming.
I think one final thought on that. I think everything you said about book bans is correct. I also think that the way that some of these specific statutes work is unusual in that it empowers an individual crank to basically remove something from a library. This isn't the Board of Education deciding what curricula are allowed, what books are in the library. This is like basically a private right of action to come in and say, I don't like that book. Right. I think it's offensive in the following ways, and it presumptively gets removed from the library. I think that's a very, very dangerous thing to do in education context. Thank you.
Senator Bozeman.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Ranking Member, for this important hearing. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here. One of the things that I'm very, very concerned about is the widespread shortage of teachers across the country. Certainly, they are the underpinning of the United States in so many different ways. According to a recent GAO report, public education lost about 77% of its total teaching population, 233,000 instructors between 2019 and 2021. Furthermore, in Arkansas, data from the state's education department indicates the worst shortages are in our rural districts. And
right.
To address teacher shortages in Arkansas, the Arkansas Teacher Corps recently shifted from recruiting newer college grads to helping teachers already working but who aren't licensed. The fiscal year 24 budget requests $3 billion for educator development, including funding specifically to bolster the teacher workforce. How exactly is the administration planning on spending this money to address the teacher shortage? And specifically, how will the administration ensure that rural areas are not left behind when addressing these shortages? I think almost all of the teachers that were hired in Arkansas actually didn't have in the rural areas, didn't have teaching certificates.
Right.
You know, I mean, this is just a very, very serious problem.
Yeah, it is. Thank you, Senator. I share that concern with you. That's a major focus for us at the Department of Education, especially in areas like rural communities where it's even more difficult. So I appreciate that sentiment. I share with you that we are on it. We recognize that rural communities have a greater need. We are asking for dollars to make sure that we're lifting the profession, that we're providing dollars for professional development, pathways for teachers, recruitment programs. Our budget, unlike budgets in the past, is really focusing on trying to have recruitment programs. I'll give you an example of one that I think will benefit communities, rural communities. We have apprenticeship programs that we're trying to expand. As you know, student teachers don't get paid during the 4 months of student teaching. It's hard to welcome someone into a profession and ask them to work for free for 4 months, especially if teachers on average are making 20% less than people with similar degrees. So we have to change how we're thinking about it. We went from two states with apprenticeships to 16. It's my goal to get to all 50. So we're looking at pathway programs through these dollars to expand them. In rural communities, The rural education program, we're asking for $215 million to be very specific around rural education. And then again, Title I and IDEA, we're looking at additional dollars for rural communities to make sure that they can bring teachers into those communities to support the students. We recognize that is an issue, and we look forward to working with you to support rural education.
Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. As a former student athlete, I'm particularly concerned about recent data related to the mental health challenges faced by student athletes. Over the last few months, I've heard from student athletes across sports and institutions highlighting the pressure they feel to perform both in the classroom and on the field. According to an NCAA student athlete well-being study released last year, the number of student athletes reporting mental health concerns is roughly two times higher than before the pandemic. Can you elaborate on, any ideas if you all are working to address the unique mental health needs of the student athlete population on college campuses? And does the department have specialized programs to serve the student athlete population?
Thank you for that. One thing we know is high school and college could be pretty stressful, right? Period. You throw a pandemic on it, basic needs need to be met, and then the demands of athletics, which, I have a godson who's graduating in 2 days, and he was on the basketball team, and just the demands of travel, and
right.
In addition to the classes, he's studying engineering. So I recognize firsthand what it feels like. We want to make sure that our students are able to take advantage of those co-curricular activities. In our budget, we're asking for $150 million to support mental health in our institutions of higher education, which is an area that I felt, sir, over the last 3 years, our institutions are doing a better job recognizing that some of these needs have to be addressed pervasively, that they cannot be left to after the trauma. So we are investing in mental health supports and higher education, and we do believe that supporting our athletes is a big part of that because many of those students have a lot on their plate as well.
Good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We are anticipating at least one additional senator who's, I think, making her way over for questions. So I'm going to start a second round as we expect her to come shortly. And I want to continue on this topic of mental health.
Right.
I know we're all aware how hard this pandemic has been on students. And I shared some of the alarming statistics from the state of Wisconsin in my opening remarks. I've certainly heard from parents who are frustrated with how difficult it is to find mental health services for their children. So I want to hear from you not only how the department is using available funds and authorities, but how your department is coordinating with the Department of Health and Human Services, which also has authorities and funding to increase student access to school-based mental health services.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think that's the way we're moving in the future, that it is not limited to the school personnel. When I was a school principal, we had a school-based health center from the community that we gave a classroom and an office to. I had students on a regular basis visiting the school-based health. We also had a dental health because if the students' teeth hurt, they're not learning as well. And we recognize that model worked. So when we talk about mental health, it's really important that I contextualize it. Mental health support is also providing proactive, positive activities for students, after-school programming, connections with the local boys and girls clubs for them to have a safe place to go after school. But with regard to the more Tier 2, Tier 3 mental health support, which is engaging with a school social worker or a community social worker, we've seen an expansion of programs, and we're funding and supporting and lifting up programs that are connected to the community. I visited I believe it was in Nevada, a high school that was connected to a four-year university and connected to a hospital. It was just the most expansive program that I've seen. Parents are able to come in and get support as well. we really need to lift up those models. The collaboration with HHS is critical. Javier and I have talked a lot, Secretary Becerra and I have talked a lot about this. And the president charged us with ensuring that Medicaid is able to support some of the mental health and behavioral health needs of our students. So we're pleased to be working more closely together and modeling what we expect in our states between the State Department of Education and the Health Services. I do believe that a shared model is critical. I think the full-service community school dollars that we're asking for will promote that as well.
Okay. Senator Britt, do I need to give you a couple more seconds, or are you prepared for? Okay, Senator Britt, you're recognized.
Thank you so much, Madam Chairman. I appreciate it. And thank you for allowing me to have a few minutes to ask some questions. Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for being here today. Before moving on to a number of topics, and I know several things have already been covered that I had wanted to kind of dig into, I do want to be just honest and direct about my concerns with the Department of Education and their role in American education today. The issue of education policy, I believe, should fall within the domain of the states and localities rather than the federal government. When the Department of Education was established as a cabinet-level department in 1980, it was hoped that, among other things, the department would supplement and complement the efforts of states and localities to really improve the quality of education across the country. When I look at my great state of Alabama, obviously there are pockets of underserved areas that I believe need educational opportunities in order to truly move forward. I am of the belief that education is the foundation. It is the pathway to the American dream. And I'm frustrated that there are still so many pockets that lack the ability to really give a child an opportunity to move forward. And so when the federal government's involving moved, if you kind of sort of look back then the data showed in reading that the average score among a 17-year-old student it's not statistically significantly different than it is today. And so I look at those metrics that we use to create the department, and they look just about the same today. And so I'm frustrated with the lack of movement, with the lack of progress that I believe is hindering our children. So getting that aside, I want to jump into some questions. Mr. Secretary, on Monday, when discussed the current debate surrounding the debt ceiling, the White House press secretary said, if you buy a car, you're expected to pay the monthly payments. If you buy a home, you're expected to pay the mortgage every month. That is the expectation, end quote. Do you agree with that statement?
Thank you, Senator, for first of all, your comments earlier. I share with you that passion and that urgency to make sure that all kids in this country can succeed, and that place or race are not determinants or predictors of outcomes. So I truly share that belief, and that I appreciate your passion on that.
Thank you.
So with regard to your question.
Yes, so in the White House press secretary this week stated, if you buy a car, you're expected to pay the monthly payment. If you buy a home, you're expected to pay the monthly mortgage every month. That is the expectation, end quote. And I'm saying, do you agree with that statement?
I agree that,
okay.
yes.
So I am of the belief, and this is where I have some frustration, is I also believe that same logic must apply to student loans.
Right.
And so I'd like your perspective on that as well.
I appreciate that, Senator. And you know, we agree, and we're preparing to restart repayment because the emergency period is over, and we're preparing our borrowers to restart. But as you know, the HEROES Act provides me the opportunity to create a waiver for those who were impacted significantly by the pandemic, very similar to small businesses the year before, where Congress provided a little bit of support.
So it's been reported that the Biden administration is considering a number of steps to ensure a more gradual return to repayment once payments are formally scheduled to resume a 60 days after the pause expires. So some of the steps apparently include, one, student loan servicers not charging interest on federal student loans again until September. The second one that is out there is delaying until October as the first of the month, in which any borrower will be required to make a payment. And the third one that is out there is the implementation of a certain safety net period in which borrowers aren't penalized for missing payments once repayments begin. So, Mr. Secretary, can you confirm if the department is considering these measures or any similar measures that might be put into place after that pause expires?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. We recognize after 3 years of paused payments through 2 administrations that the repayment restart is going to be a very important step, and we want to make sure it's done right. We're confident that the targeted debt relief will address some of the concerns of some of our borrowers who are struggling right now. But as they re-enter repayment, it's really important that we provide support for them. With regard to specific strategies, I'd be happy to have my team follow up to respond to those specific
I would greatly appreciate that.
questions
My
you have.
time is expiring. I just want to say I agree that if you buy a car, you're expected to make your monthly payments. If you buy a home, you're expected to pay your mortgage. And if you take out a loan, you're expected to repay it. And that comes obviously with student loans as well. So I think we have to teach our children that if you assume a responsibility, you have to figure out and have a path forward to fulfill that responsibility. So thank you so much, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Britt. Senator Capito.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for being here. And echoing Senator Britt's frustration, I noticed in response to my question, similar type of question as Senator Britt's. We're not getting a real specific answer here, and I think one thing that I've known through the pandemic, and I think we've all learned, is clear communication is absolutely critical, whether it's about a loan or whether it's about to wear a mask or if your school's going to close. So I would hope that the administration would be more specific, and you would be more specific and in future communications with the folks that are either going to have to restart, that should be restarting the payment of their loan, because it's coming, and I think that I think the clear communication would be much appreciated. And the second thing I would say in terms of a comment is, I mentioned about the NAEP scores in my opening statement. It's deeply troubling to me. I mean, I'm a mother of 3. I've got 8 grandchildren. I know those daggone tests when they come in and the kids have to sit there and the parents get all nervous because you got to make sure you get them up and feed them, and they're all ready for their test score like it's the biggest day in their life. But it does show trends, if nothing else. And the trend is not good. Mm-hmm. So my concern here is we cannot reset the bar here. In other words, the baseline can't go down to where we are. We have to keep remembering that we're in a trough right now and still have all these aspirational goals. I'm sure you as an educator were always looking at that. And so I would encourage you, rather as an administration or as a country, as the leader of our education, to say to the parents and the students out there, you know, we've had a rough time. We've got all these support services that we're talking about to try to help you, but we're not going to let you stay where you are. That's not satisfactory. You need to move up. And so my quick question is on the short-term Pell. Sure. We've heard a lot about workforce, and a lot of what we're doing in our state is short-term training. And there's nothing in this budget, as far as I understand, that would help us with those folks in certificate programs or short-term programs. What is your
Yeah, definitely
reasoning?
happy to share that. And let me just tell you, Senator, I couldn't agree more. When I became a 4th grade teacher, I wanted to make sure all my kids had access. I wanted to make sure they were reading, and now I have a wider scope, but that passion is still there. And I appreciated even your hand gestures, because we're raising the bar. That's our strategy. It's called raising the bar for literacy, numeracy. We shouldn't just aim to recover, because the data before 2019 wasn't great. So moving to Pell and short-term Pell, you know, in my conversations and my travel with community college presidents, 4-year college presidents, industry partners who are saying we want to work with our 2-year schools to make sure that our employees have the skills, but they don't need a 2-year program. We recognize that we need to be malleable and we need to be conducive. If I'm asking universities and K-12 institutions to think outside the box and evolve, we too need to do that. So I am in favor of exploring short-term Pell with making sure that there's accountability and there's high-quality programming. And I think that's something we both agree on. So I'm excited to see how that develops, but we recognize that if we're really going to meet the demand of these tsunami of jobs that are coming, we need to be flexible as well.
Thank you, Senator Capito. That will end our hearing today. I want to thank my fellow committee members who participated in a thoughtful conversation and back and forth. And thank you to you, Secretary Cardona. For any senators who wish to ask additional questions, questions for the record will be due on May 19th at 5 p.m. The hearing record will also remain open for members who wish to submit additional materials for the record. And with that, the committee will stand in recess.
Thank you very much.